Welcome to the Vinny and Lucio show. This is our first episode. And Luch, where are we? What are we doing? Who do we have?
What are we doing here? We're on Passyunk Avenue. Do they call this the heart of South Philadelphia?
I think they do. East Passyunk. It certainly is.
East Passyunk. Okay. Yeah. Yes. We're actually at the Philitalia Italian Art. What is it? Italian Museum? Italian American Museum.
Absolutely.
Correct? Okay.
This place is fantastic. I walked in here. I don't think I want to leave.
There's too much. There's too much to look at, and we're definitely going to take a little tour with our guests. But before then, just so everyone knows, the Philly Italian organization is an Italian organization founded by Dr. Nestico. He's a Calabrian-born but South Philadelphian. He's been here for many years, and this is all him. We owe it up to him, and we want to thank him for especially us being here.
Thank you, Dr. Nestigo. Thank you to Severo, your son, everybody that's involved with Philitalia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. So what we got? Vin, let's talk about our guest.
Well, that would be nice. Hello, Michele. Welcome to our first podcast.
Thank you.
Let's give the audience a little knowledge about who you are, what you're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me as your first guest. I'm very excited to be here. And what a nice environment to film your podcast in. I mean, there's the history and the memories and the spirits that are in here are probably, as we were saying a little bit before we got on the camera. I appreciate you inviting me. So what can I tell you?
So how did you get started? Tell us about the book. Tell us everything. Tell us, how did you first begin?
Yeah, the beginning for sure, yes.
Let's start from the beginning. And I understand what you're saying because me too. I feel like I could have sworn I just seen that little thing move right there. But anyway, tell us how you got started with cooking.
Oh, that's a good one. All right. Well, I'm an Italian American. I am the granddaughter of 4 immigrants. So I'm half Abruzzese, half Sicilian. I grew up in South Jersey, actually in a Jewish neighborhood. But
they love our cooking, so don't worry about it.
There's not much. We always say there's not much difference between the Jews and the Italians. All very much into food, very much into family. Right. But I always loved to cook, and I think because I always loved to eat. And I actually started cooking with my mom when I was. She told me when I was 5 years old. I would stand next to her at the oven, and the first thing I learned how to cook was eggs. And I just had an affinity for it. I loved it. I had an Italian grandmother that I would make pasta with, Italian aunts as well, and my mom. So I was always really cooking, always in the kitchen with my mom. But I was also very into academics. So I never really considered going into food as a career until I was actually later on in a career that I was not very happy in. But I actually started out, I was an accounting major in college. And I actually went the direction of working as a CPA in audit for about 5 years. During that time, I had the opportunity to actually live in a different country. I lived in Geneva, Switzerland, which is right next to Switzerland's right next to Italy. At a very young age, I was 25 years old. I had the opportunity to go for 2 years. And I'm mentioning it right now because it really was a life-defining experience for me. Even before that, though, I think I was working in public accounting, let's say a year and a half or something like that. I got jaded pretty quickly. And I realized, I don't really know if this is for me, but I was, you don't go to college and have all these student loans.
Right.
And then go back and tell your parents a year and a half later, you know what, Mom and Dad, I'm thinking about maybe cooking school. So that was a conversation that I didn't want to have that early on. So, but going away to live in a different country and work in a different country gave me the courage to come back and make such a big 180 decision.
For sure, him.
Yeah, and living in Europe, it gave me the opportunity to travel.
The experience, right? For
experience. Living and working amongst Europeans where food is so central to their lives.
Sure.
Whether or not they worked in, I always joke, when I was working in New York City, everyone that I worked with at lunch, all we ever talked about was sports. When I went over to Switzerland, when I went, again, working in public accounting, all we ever talked about at lunch was food. Because I'm working with Europeans, I'm working with people who are from Australia, other expats, locals, Italian, Swiss people, French people. It was really great, and it gave me also the opportunity to travel everywhere. I came back home after 2 years. I quit my job, moved back in with my parents at age 27, right across the river in South Jersey. And
you sound usually the guys do that. The Italian men usually move back with their parents or the mother.
It's us that go to the basement.
Yeah. But I did it because I was going to cooking school, actually here in Philadelphia, not that far from here. I went to cooking school in West Philadelphia at the restaurant school.
Right.
And I got a degree in culinary arts. And, for me going to cooking school, I was thinking that I wanted to be in the food industry in one way or another. I knew restaurants weren't my calling. In fact, the idea of working the line would give me agita, thinking about that. Like, for me, I loved the idea of prepared foods. In fact, when I had lived in New York City working in public accounting, I was in love with all the little Italian specialty shops, like the Agate and Valentina's and the Dean and DeLuca's. And I loved this idea of prepared foods. And this is before it was everywhere.
Right.
And the big joke is people would come to visit me in New York, and I wouldn't take them to the museums. I'd say, like, you got to visit this specialty store. You got to see this cheese department. It's amazing. And so I always thought loosely before when I went to cooking school, like maybe when I graduate from cooking school, I'll, down the road, open my own gourmet food store and combine my business background with the food. That's like loosely what I thought going into culinary school. I didn't do that, but I did end up working in retail food, and I worked after a short stint in a couple of restaurants in Philadelphia, I got a job at a small company you may have heard of called Whole Foods Market.
Yeah, small, for sure.
And I started in operations, and I worked in stores for probably about 2.5 years, and then I went to corporate, and worked my way up to essentially was the equivalent of like a culinary director role. And I had my dream job, and I worked there for about 16 years. I mean, it was really great. I traveled a lot with them, and really refined my recipe development skills on the commercial side. Everything was food service, working on a lot of recipes for people that would be making these dishes in the stores every day over and over and over again, or sometimes even really big batch recipes for, say, a 200-gallon soup that was being made at a commissary that would go out to all the stores in the region. It was a really fantastic job. It was a fantastic company, and it really did define me in terms of my personal quality standards when it comes to food. So again, like very early in my food career, and at still at kind of a young age in the food business, I learned the importance of ingredients and the importance of clean ingredients and not working with a lot of junk.
Continuation on that, growing up in West Philadelphia, the area that you went to school at, what was your flair that you brought from going overseas? Like, you definitely had a different experience. I'm sure that a lot of others that were that you worked around with, what would you say that helped you in what ways?
Well, I actually want to add a little bit to that, in that I'd say the first difference that I noticed going into the food business with my particular background was not living in Europe initially. Mm-hmm. It was being a CPA.
Gotcha.
It was having that structure and that mind frame and being really strong in math,
which is very important,
and numbers. Yeah. And because working in a department in a grocery store, you are responsible for the financial well-being of that department in addition to the food.
Makes sense.
And I kind of because I had this other whole skill set of mine besides what I was learning in cooking school, I very early into that job was brought into, hey, can you help us out with all the financials for the department? Wow. And really, I was like, I don't really want to. Because I just want to cook. But sense. Yes, of course.
That's the boring things.
Yeah.
The fun things,
right.
Obviously you take precedence.
And it turns out that I was very right-brained and left-brained. Like, and in fact, my colleagues used to call me out on that in a good way. Like, Michele, you're so logical, but you also are so creative. And I think that, I've always been creative with food, but it was a logical, like that whole CPA side of me also was very useful, especially years later at Whole Foods when I started to develop culinary programs, because not only was it like, oh, here's a really great idea, but here's a really great idea that somebody can execute every day.
Right.
Very easily.
Nice.
As opposed to but the international and all the travel and all that sort of experience came into play a little bit further along into my career when I was responsible for a lot of the creativity and the innovation.
Okay, gotcha.
In the stores, working on new programs and new recipes and new concepts that were going in the stores, because I just pulled from a lot of my travels. In fact, I remember one of the coolest projects that I worked on was when we were opening a store in New York City, and I got to open up. Our regional president wanted to put an Italian restaurant in the store. So I was thrilled because really my passion has always been Italian food.
It makes sense, right?
Right up your alley.
And I had traveled to Italy a lot, right? So I absolutely pulled a lot of the authentic recipes from, dishes that I learned when I was traveling.
Great stuff. I love it. Yeah. So, overall, once moving forward, there was a time that it seemed like everybody had a specific time and we became more creative. What happened with you, maybe let's say the pandemic area time, that you thought about doing something?
So fast forward.
Let's fast forward. Just curiosity.
Okay, so
your whole creation.
Yeah, so here we are, March 2020. I'm living in New York City in a 1-bedroom apartment with no outdoor space. So here we are. We're not allowed to really do anything.
Right.
And I was consulting at that point. I had moved on from Whole Foods 2 jobs prior. I had just landed a great consulting client, which just went away.
Right.
It was going to be a long term. It had really taken a while to kind of nurture that relationship to get the contract signed, and then that project just went away. So here I am, really, with a lot of time on my hands, and I thought, well, maybe I should work on an ebook. In fact, I was talking with a friend in Texas who was thinking the same thing, and in my mind, I was like, well, what's an ebook? What is an ebook? An ebook is like a PDF that maybe I could sell on my website, maybe 10, 12 recipes, something like that. Keep in mind, I hadn't had a website at that point yet. I was still working on the website as well.
Gotcha.
So I had this idea of turning regular non-soup recipes into soup. Now, a lot of people ask me, where did that idea come from? The reality is, I just have 1,000 different bubbles of ideas up there, and that was just one that I decided to work on that was just fun to think about. And I had worked on a couple of soupified recipes prior to that, and it just seemed like a fun area. So I started brainstorming, okay, what do I want these 12 recipes to be? Well, before I know it, I had 112 ideas. So I realized very quickly it was going to be more than just a 10 or 12 recipe PDF. And then time went on as I kept developing the recipes, and I thought maybe I can actually do a printed cookbook. And I learned about a print on demand service that you can do as an independent publisher. And so that is what I did. So I ended up using lockdown in 2020 to write my first cookbook. I started
amazing.
in April, and it was released right after Thanksgiving in November 2020.
Wow.
Now,
You definitely, yes, this is the other
is
Now
book.
that's the one right there.
Super
All right, beautiful. Let's
So
take
definitely
that.
you have to say you use your time wisely, because I'm sure a lot of people did not do that when they were home, and you know what I mean? They were locked down, and it just seems like you definitely you brought your creation to life. It's a beautiful thing to
Thank you.
to have, and I know I love soup, but a lot of people love soup, and it's like the recipes that you put together, that anything, give us an idea of recipes that you can soupify.
Yeah, so the idea of soupifying for you out there, if you don't have the cookbook yet, is soupifying is a new word that my sister actually came up with, that word, which is perfect, is turning something into soup. So turning something that's not a soup into soup. For example, eggplant parmesan, great recipe.
Very popular for
the
sure.
The first recipe in the cookbook is eggplant parm soup.
Okay.
So the idea is to get as much of the original dish, as much of that eggplant parm dish, for example, as possible into a spoonable bowl format. The tomatoes, obviously the eggplant, the cheese, the savoriness, the richness, and the crispiness. How do you get the crispiness in a soup, though? That's where the toppings become so important.
Right.
So throughout the book, you'll see a lot of recipes that have a topping that, you can leave the topping off, but the topping is usually so critical to making the soup as close as possible the original dish. And you'll see that later on when we actually have. I actually brought you guys a little bit of soupified
We don't say
soups
no
to
to
try.
Okay. That sounds great.
So I would say that, and I just saw something about how is soup a meal? Just actually this morning I seen something about that online, and the question was, can soup be a meal? And I think we just answered that. And the interesting thing you just mentioned was you also are able to get the contrast of the crunchiness with the soup. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that soup can be a meal. For sure, the recipes in this book are meant to be a meal in and of themselves. This is a very whimsical, fun, creative, but cookbook filled with hearty comfort food recipes that are much like I tell people, they're not the chicken pastinas of the world. These are actually very
Where's the pastina?
yeah, exactly.
Controversial
thank goodness, because you can't get
conversation,
pastina
yeah.
anymore.
Right.
Yeah, no, but these are very hearty. In fact, I see people making these, and this is what they're eating for dinner. They're not having soup as your first course and then you're having something else. This is the meal.
What I love about it too is that it's a breath of fresh air, because we're all used to the same old. I mean, we love them. I mean, I absolutely love all our different Italian recipes.
Sure.
But just a great idea.
But just to have it in
for sure.
Right, have it in a different form that's unique, that hasn't. I mean, I haven't had this before, so that's really interesting.
Thank you. It's fun, and it's while it's not an Italian or Italian American cookbook, It's has recipes like Chinese egg roll soup and Reuben soup and bacon cheeseburger soup. My Italian American roots absolutely come through in my writing and in many of the selections, but not all of them. Like, for example, there are 4 chilled soups in the book. There's a caprese soup, there's a prosciutto and melon soup,
Wow.
and there's eggplant parm soup, chicken marsala, shrimp scampi. I mean, there's...
I'm getting hungry. Thinking
Yeah,
about it. This is
Think
really
about it. I always was
They
a
are
fan.
very fun. It's a very fun cookbook.
I always was a fan, like, when you have a plate in front of you, and a lot of people just kind of like eat that one thing first, and they just don't mix. They're afraid to mix 2 different, 3 different things together, and then getting that flavor in your mouth to see, like, what would this taste like if it's together? So you actually created that for people, and I'm looking forward to what now specifically what was it that you made for us? Let's say.
Well, we're in Philadelphia.
Okay.
We're in South Philly, so I had to bring you the Philly cheesesteak soup.
Okay, that makes sense. That's good. That's
Bingo.
a good thing.
Absolutely right on point.
Which,
That's
when
great.
I say it's not like a consomme, this is a hearty soup. Well, a cheesesteak is, let's face it, if you're eating a cheesesteak, you're not really worried about what you're eating that day.
And it's got
You're
everything
not,
in
you're
it.
not exactly counting your calories.
You're not counting your calories. So the same thing with this soup. Well, I can't wait to get your reaction after you.
That's great. That's
Likewise.
awesome.
What? Tell us a little bit too about what made you decide to turn this into a full blown sort of. I guess it's a career now. I mean, this is something that is consuming most of your time, right?
Mangia with Michele. Right. So I guess we could talk about how Mangia with Michele came about. And so again, at that point, probably 18, 20 years in a food service career. And as a consultant, I was consulting at that point, and I have my consulting business is called It's All About the Food, and I work with different food companies on mostly the creative side of their menu, recipes, and sometimes operations and whatnot. But as an independent consultant, I'm sure you can imagine there are peaks and there are valleys in terms of how
Sure.
busy you are.
Right.
And so there were times when I was working all the time, and then there were times when I was not working at all. And I always had this personal passion of anything and everything Italian food, Italian travel, Italian culture. So I started a second Instagram account, and all about Italian, my love of everything Italian. It actually was called In Abruzzi si mangia bene
Okay.
when I first started it, and that was after I had been to Abruzzi in 2015. Because I had learned about this phrase. I'm like, and I'm half Abruzzese, so I thought, well, that's fun. But then a couple years went by, and I thought maybe I can start actually putting recipes out there to the people out there on social media, and maybe this could be sort of eventually a side business to complement my consulting practice.
Gotcha.
That was my only thought. So I changed the name from In Abruzzi si mangia bene because nobody in the world would ever know what that is.
Unfortunately,
And it was like 1,000 letters.
You definitely want to get that variety and get like the kind of like we did, man. We changed it up in order to
Right.
bring the variety of
Gotta
people
tweak
in.
a little bit.
And so
For
I changed
sure.
it to Mangia with Michele. And for a few years, it was only on Instagram. And now I started putting recipes for the home cook out there. And before I knew it, it took on a whole life of its own. And this was it didn't even take that long. And all of a sudden, I was living in New York at the time. I started meeting so many people through my social media account, which I thought was so strange. But to this day, I've made so many great friends through Instagram. But so at first, it really opened me up to the Italian American community, which I hadn't really been involved in my life, my adult life, to be honest, up to that point. Because I just spent so much of my life into my career, and working. So I became really connected to the Italian American community, and then also to other people that were doing what I was doing, meaning I guess you could call them influencers or Instagrammers or bloggers or whatnot. And then, most importantly, I connected with so many people out there that were making my recipes at home.
Wow.
And I absolutely, and to this day, it's the most important thing, and it just drives me. It's
gratifying.
like so gratifying. It warms my heart when somebody writes to me and says, "Oh my goodness, the recipe that you just put out there, I haven't had that since my nonna or my aunt so and so, or my mom made it many, many years ago. You just brought me right back there. I can't wait to try it. Your recipe
that's
looks
a great
just like the
feeling.
one." It is such a great feeling. And when people, even especially with the cookbook, I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten about my lasagna soup.
Wow, that's
Wow.
great.
And it's a soup that seems to have brought like families together. Like, oh, I made this soup with my family, and
I know which one I'm going to try.
I want the Philly cheesesteak. That's what I want.
yeah. And,
But,
so
yeah.
this, I guess, the connection that I made with the people out there really kind of kept me going. And then over time, I realized that my professional passions began to shift, and I was less interested in food service and more interested in growing Mangia with Michele into a brand.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
That's
it's been a journey. It's a journey, and I definitely have a vision of where I'd like it to go. It's not an overnight project, but I am really enjoying it, and I do want to do more cookbooks. I do want to do obviously a lot more with Mangia with Michele.
Definitely. Sounds great. Well, we're gonna take a quick, let's say a break, because we're gonna do a little bit that Michele, we brought her out down in Passyunk. We have a couple surprises for the viewers, and we're gonna go to that while we're gonna eat some cheesesteak, right?
You don't have to ask me twice.
Cheesesteak soup.
A cheesesteak soup. I'm sorry, superfied Philly cheesesteak. We're gonna go Mangia.
Superfied.
We're gonna go Mangia with Michele right now.
Let's do it.
We'll be back.
Let's go.
Albino tribute. I don't know. Ginger? White. No more. No more. All right, what about the hamsters? Any hamsters? This guy, what kind of business is this? No hamsters, no white albino pigeons? No. Well, my friend, oh. Let me ask you a question.
Oh, okay.
What did you buy today?
A bicycle
What kind?
from a store.
Okay, well listen. What's this thing hanging out of there? Can I? Oh, how you doing? Nice to meet you. That's what. Delicious.
Come on, man.
So this spoon, which I see here, the spatula, I should say, this is really, really cool, I have to say. And this is like a dual purpose, right?
Well, I'm only using it in the kitchen right
We
now.
should listen. Here's a disclaimer: you should only use it for food.
Yes.
But this is really cool. I love the
But
whole.
I'm sure we all have a
marketing.
history with it.
Yes,
Definitely,
right.
for sure.
Well, another thing too, I'm just going to lay this here for now, is I think that's also what kind of interweaves where we're at. I mean, just thinking about it, you're talking about how people enjoy your soups because it reminds them of doing it with their grandparents, aunts, parents, whoever. And really, we need to continue that so that our kids, grandkids, so on and so forth, get those same traditions, because these type of traditions and these types of customs and the way people used to cook and still do need to be preserved and encouraged. So this way there's much more Mangia Michele's out there in the future.
No, for sure. And I am focusing the recipes on my website for the most part on the classic Italian American dishes that a lot of us as Italian Americans can remember growing up. Whereas I would say this is more like innovative twists on the classics,
Right.
for the next generation.
And you also have a variety of different, it's just not, which is great. It's not just Italian. There's other great ideas and recipes that's, even if you're not into Italian, who wouldn't be? But if in case you're not, there's also there's probably a soup for just every night of the week for the whole month.
There's 31 recipes in there.
There you go.
Wow. Why did
That's
you pick?
exactly
Why did you pick 31?
That's
Curiosity.
exactly what I thought. One
Okay.
recipe for every day of the month.
Very good.
Right.
That's great.
All right, Grace. Well, listen, I think it's time to go try your masterpiece.
It's the Vinny Lucio show. We're about to get superfied with what, Vinny?
With something that I would tell you right now, if there's any ceramic left, they're going to be lucky, because Michele prepared for us this beautiful, beautiful cheesesteak soup, and I'm about to jump in. I can't. My hands are shaking. I can't wait to try it.
Let's mangia with Michele. Buon appetito a tutti. Ciao.
And we're back.
And we're back after stuffing our face, pretty much. All right. Let's put this over here so everyone can see it. Probably more that way. Okay, so let me tell you, it was superfied, delicious, I guess we could say, right?
Superlicious?
Superlicious.
Somebody used that word with me the other day.
It was great. So we just had the Philly cheesesteak soup. And I definitely could have tasted the cheeses. What were the cheeses inside there, Michele?
There was a sharp provolone and an American.
Okay, wow.
which I think together
great
actually
mix.
make the perfect cheesesteak
Nice.
because you've got the
Absolutely.
creaminess from the American and you've got the sharpness
The
from the
Italian
provolone.
American, a beautiful thing. You brought those two together. That's a great thing. I love it.
That's exactly how I like my cheesesteak: provolone, mushrooms. I mean, that was
Mushrooms,
perfect.
onions, yep.
And then you had that the consistency again with the croutons. The croutons.
The
again,
croutons
were-
represented the bread part of it,
Right.
for sure.
And that
Great
was
stuff, great
basically a hoagie roll or a sub. If
Yes.
you're in New York, it's also called a sub out there, but we call it hoagie
Yes.
in Philly.
And then a
Hoagie
lot
roll.
of people like to have the pickled hot or sweet like banana peppers
Exactly,
on the
yep.
side or on their sandwich. So that was the topping for this soup.
That's a beautiful thing.
Now
Also-
this, you got to try this.
Tanginess worked out.
That's a home run.
There's also a lot of ribeye. There was a lot of meat in that soup. And because I love to have my cheesesteaks with a lot of onions and mushrooms, there were also a lot of onions and mushrooms in the soup,
Perfect. Just how I like it too.
just like you like it.
You know, it's a funny thing, Michelle, that I was making a sandwich, right? Not realizing that you'll be saying something very similar to what you just said. And we didn't know each other, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, because I called it the Italian American, reason being because, you know, you're putting the two cheeses together. But of course, I pulled mortadella, you know, and all that stuff. But I love it that you have the cheesesteak from Philly. And we just ate it and it was just delicious, I have to say.
Oh, I'm so
beautiful.
glad you liked it. And
It
then,
was
you know,
awesome.
obviously we had the croutons on top, which represented the bread part of the sandwich.
Right,
The sub roll,
makes
there was
sense.
sub roll croutons. And then because a lot of people like to have some of those pickled hot peppers or the sweet peppers on their sandwich, that's why I topped it off with some of the pepperoncini.
Wow.
Everything was perfect harmony. All the taste, everything was balanced. Yeah, the crunchiness of the sub or hoagie roll, as we call it locally. And then, I
Yes.
mean, the ribeye was amazing. The whole thing. Yeah,
Thank you. Now you don't need to eat for a couple of days, right?
Yes, definitely.
the whole thing was.
So, but there's still some left over. So we're gonna go back once the segment's over. We're gonna definitely get
Absolutely.
a little bit, a nice light little bowl. But going forward, so pretty much today, where we at today? What are you doing, Mangia Michelle? As is, Mangia with Michelle. What are you doing with yourself lately?
Well, I'm still consulting I say now I'm consulting on the side, but as far as Mangia with Michelle, I am working on building up my website, which is mangiawithmichelle.com. And as I said earlier, focusing mostly on the Italian American classics for the most part for that. And I definitely have ideas for more cookbooks, but that's not the first priority right now. I am going to be starting a series of cooking classes with you, I think.
Great stuff.
actually.
Yeah. I know.
Looking forward to
I
that.
appreciate
In collaboration
that.
with Philitalia, the
Yes,
great
yes,
Italian organization
sure.
that's hosting us today. And those are going to be live online cook-alongs.
Can't wait.
That's going to be
That's gonna be
fun.
fun.
Because this is recorded, but that's going to be live.
That's
It's going to
gonna be
be
live.
challenging but fun. But you know what? We're going to give it very similar to this, like in ways that we're going to give our personality to them and,
For sure.
and have fun, of
And
course.
what's going to be great about that is people can talk to us throughout and ask us questions. And we also are always going to have some surprises, right? Some giveaways, I think. And
Yes,
some other
yes.
things.
It's always about
So you got to
surprises.
sign up. So
Fantastic.
please sign up.
Kind of like the show, the variety of the show. We're going to have a lot of surprise that people don't realize yet. Wait till they see it. What do you think? You think
Absolutely.
Chicho's, you know about Chicho, right?
I'm just learning about Chicho.
Well, he's a real problem. You see him sometimes just popping up out of nowhere, and he comes around, he starts trouble. He's a real vagrant, but
we got to
we
make
have
sure.
to deal with him.
We got to make sure he's not touching the rest of the superfied cheesesteak back
If there's
there.
anything left and he's around,
I
forget
don't know.
it.
I think I want to come back on the podcast when Chicho's around.
It sounds
Down
good.
the road, maybe.
We'll have to reach out to his agent, which is like the local bookie. But so Michelle, again, now what an interesting journey. You went from you had this path in mind, you were going towards accounting, and then all of a sudden, circumstances, which is interesting too, because the pandemic it destroyed a lot. Sadly, it destroyed a lot of great businesses, and it's just horrible. If there were anything good that came out of it, is that people had to change what they were doing, change how they looked at things, and use their creativity to survive, and also maybe to produce something they may never have thought of before. And that sounds like your
That's what
circumstance.
she did for sure.
No, thank you. I'm very proud of the cookbook. It was a great journey. It was a great project. It was a lot of work, and it was funny. I just want to share this because right after I put it out, and I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how much work really went into it. And I was like, oh, but I definitely want to do. She's like, well, why do you want to do more cookbooks if it's that much? I'm like, because it feels so friggin' good.
Yeah.
I mean, the thought
the
of someone actually opening up a book of yours
It's
in a totally different household.
Yeah.
It's got again what we said earlier. It's a great feeling.
It's such an
that someone,
intangible, and I really feel like it's part of my legacy.
And I am a big fan of print because in these days where we're just always going on our phones or our laptops, it's good to have that tangible item at the kitchen table that you're looking
Yes.
at and you're copying. There's still always, and I hope there always will be a demand for cookbooks.
It's nostalgic for sure. That's where we're pretty much surrounded here. We're surrounded with some amazing things from. I mean, there's a barber shop right over there, a full barber shop. They got Caruso's chairs from Brooklyn, New York here.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. These are the things that it reminds us of how one time the immigrants, the simplicity of life. And you brought that, and you're still continuing that because you were mentioned earlier. You said about the whole ebook and all that, but you went this route, and I think I'm glad you did that. And one day it's going to be here too in this museum for sure.
And the book is still available on in digital format.
In digital, right.
For those,
But you
that
gave
do
both
prefer
options,
that. But
right.
I agree with you. I mean, for me, I prefer a printed cookbook, especially when it comes to food books, and I think a lot of people do.
Beautiful. I like it. Like you did that. Awesome. Now, now you said also website additional. I know we said about the show earlier.
Merchandise.
That's happening in April. It's starting up next month.
Yes. And I do have
I'm sorry, this month I should say, not next month. This month. Because we are in April.
That's right.
Again, what else? How can give us all everything additional that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, no, I'd say I'd love for everyone to follow me at on my social media accounts, which are all mangiawithmichele.com.
Mangia with Michele.
I'm sorry, Mangia with Michele with one L.
Mm-hmm.
My website is mangiawithmichele.com, and sign up for my mailing list, and then you can get newsletters. I don't send the newsletters.
And of course, you can get
With
the None a
everything
Spoon
in.
for sure. You know what I mean?
The Nona Spoon. As far as merchandise, I actually do have a line of Italian designs. Here's my T-shirt.
Great stuff. What's it
Very
say on
nice.
there?
Well, this one is the Roman pasta T-shirt. This is,
Great idea.
but I have a few others, and you can get them on. You can get my designs on T-shirts, mugs, tote bags, hoodies, all sorts of things. And all the links for everything, the links to my cookbook, the links to my merchandise, the links to my social media, everything is on my website. So that's probably, if you walk away from this with just one link, it would be mangiawithmichele.com. I'd love to have you on my mailing list as well. And please say hi.
Awesome.
That's
and come and cook with Michele for sure. No doubt about it.
And come Mangia with Michele.
That's certainly.
We got to cook it first. That's what I was getting.
That's true. Yes.
And wait together.
For
Well,
sure.
listen, it's amazing what you brought to us. We're very pleased, and of course, we're very pleased to have you as our first guest, our officially first guest of the Vinny and Lucio show. It's definitely has been a great experience for myself and Vinny that we have come together, and now we're slowly more and more bringing people. People are coming to us that they want to be part of this. It's a great feeling. What do you think, Ben? Right?
Look, this is off to a great start, I have to say. I mean, we had a wonderful guest. I certainly encourage everyone, please support her and look out for more from her. I think she's going to really be in bigger and better places. I can see that happening very soon.
For sure.
And we just so appreciate you bringing us your story as well as your delicious food. And thanks again. This is great.
You're welcome, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you so much. You take care of yourself, and let's go eat some more Philly cheesesteak superfied.
Great thank you, too, to Dr. Nestico and family and all members and contributors of this museum here. Philatali, if you're in South Philly, you're making your way to Philadelphia for perhaps a trip or a vacation or just visiting someone, stop by the museum. Make sure it's open. But this is an amazing place. Thanks again to those that are supporting us. And if you'd like to support us, there's going to be information that is going to be below. If you'd like to sponsor an episode or maybe even be a guest, make sure you look at the details below and get a hold of us, and we'll be happy to have you.
Ciao.
Ciao.